If you enjoy what we do, please support the channel by giving the video a like. Tonight, we're breaking down one of the internet's most disturbing horror stories, Mother Horse Eyes. It started in random Reddit comments, but grew into a massive, mysterious tale full of flesh portals, LSD experiments, and a creature known only as Mother. If you've ever tried to read it and felt lost, this video will guide you through the chaos piece by piece. Let's get into it. Mother Horse Eyes Explained. Introduction. Mother Horse Eyes is the name given to a sprawling, enigmatic horror story that first appeared in an unlikely place, random Reddit comment threads in 2016. An anonymous user, Mother Horse Eyes, often abbreviated as MHE, posted short vignettes across various subreddits, which readers eventually pieced together into a single narrative dubbed the Interface series. This unconventional storytelling method, fragments scattered on the internet, created a sense of mystery and urgency. Readers were both intrigued and terrified by recurring elements, bizarre flesh interfaces, organic portals to other realms, unnerving historical asides, and the titular Mother Horse Eyes, a monstrous being at the story's core. In this comprehensive breakdown, we'll explore what actually happens in the story, explain its major threads and references, and examine how it all ties together, including the cryptic ending. If you've heard of Mother Horse Eyes and felt lost in its labyrinth of horror, this guide will illuminate its meaning step by step. A story told in fragments. The Interface series is not a straightforward linear tale. It's a mosaic of interwoven narratives jumping across time periods, perspectives, and even genres. One moment you're in the 1960s with CIA agents tripping on LSD. The next you're hearing a child describe a stitched-together creature in a foul-smelling house. In total, the series comprises around 100 short segments, often called posts, which were later archived by fans. These segments are written in different styles, journal entries, first-person accounts, even an entry from a cat's point of view in one case, and feature numerous characters. At first, they can feel disjointed, but gradually the pieces reveal a larger, connected mythology. Part of the fun and terror for readers was trying to put these puzzle pieces together. Some recurring story threads include origins of the flesh interfaces, posts dated in 1960s, shadowy government experiments with LSD that open portals of living flesh, historical horrors posts dated in the 1940s and earlier, references to Nazi experiments, concentration camps like Treblinka, and other dark events tied into the flesh interface phenomenon. Mother Horse Eyes and the Children, undated but likely 1980s. Vignettes of children living with a grotesque mother figure who is not what she seems. The author's narrative, post dated in 2000s. A character, Nick, struggling with addiction and haunted by memories, who uncovers that the horrors are real. Near future tech horrors. Post dated in 2020s to 2030. A future with people cocooned in virtual reality, hygiene beds, and an AI called Q that threatens humanity. Post-apocalyptic or alternate worlds post dated in the far future. Scenes of tribal societies, the river people, and even humans in space, all still under the shadow of the flesh interfaces and Mother's influence. Despite the broad scope, the same core concepts and themes surface repeatedly in these narratives. The flesh interface is the nexus of it all, an otherworldly terror that spans centuries, and Mother Horse Eyes is a key entity linked to the flesh interfaces across different times. By examining each major narrative thread, we can see how the story builds a chilling mythology piece by piece. Flesh interfaces in the LSD experiments. One of the earliest chronological story threads explains how the flesh interfaces came into being. In the 1950s to 60s, during the real-world MK-Ultra program, when the CIA infamously experimented with LSD on unwitting subjects, The Interface series introduces a twist. The CIA didn't just drug individuals, it secretly dosed entire departments of its own agency with psychedelics. Whole teams were unknowingly kept on altered states for extended periods to see how their research and behavior would diverge and mutate away from normal. The result was shocking. In their drug-mutated minds, these agents invented impossible technology, including the flesh interfaces. According to one MHE entry, styled as a declassified report, CIA researchers under heavy LSD created restraint bed portals and flesh interfaces, essentially portals composed of organic matter. Imagine a gaping doorway or tunnel, but instead of wood or metal, it's made of living flesh, pulsing and segmented. The text describes this development in a clinical tone. This is how the restraint bed portals and flesh interfaces were first created, i.e., from a heavily psycho-mutated hierarchy. The entire thing had to be eliminated, but the technology it created has been revolutionary. In short, the government accidentally birthed grotesque portal technology by frying its own people's brains on acid, and then had to purge the evidence, though the knowledge lived on. Subsequent entries in the CIA research narrative, as fans call it, depict scientists and military teams grappling with these flesh interfaces. They conduct experiments, throwing objects and animals into the fleshy portals to observe what happens. Some creatures that go through are never seen again. Others come back altered or horribly fused with organic matter. A recurring question is why the portals manifest surrounded by giant metallic cylinders and segmented flesh, almost like the rib body of a worm or intestine. The interfaces also seem connected to certain locations. Tunnels formed underground that eerily mirror structures above ground. One team discovers an entire network of tunnels beneath a site, matching the layout of buildings above. All of these details contribute to the unsettling feeling that the flesh interfaces obey some unknown physics or design. They aren't random. There's a pattern, but one beyond our comprehension. Crucially, the scientists never reach a satisfying explanation for the flesh interface's nature. They document phenomena, e.g., chitinous cruciform, insect-like cross shapes, found near interfaces, but cannot determine where these portals lead or what mother is. In fact, the narrative hints that exploring the interfaces only raises more questions. One researcher remarks that studying the flesh portals is like throwing things into the interface, like we throw theories at the story. Answers remain elusive. This becomes a meta-commentary. Just as readers propose theories about MHE's story, the in-world scientists theorize about the portals, and both are left in the dark. The origin story thus plants seeds of cosmic horror. Humans have accidentally tapped into something far larger and more terrifying than they realized, and even our brightest minds can barely scratch the surface of understanding it. Horror across history. The Interface series doesn't confine its terror to the 1960s. It strongly implies that the flesh interface phenomenon and the malignant influence behind it has been entwined with human history's darkest chapters. Throughout the scattered posts, there are references and mini-narratives set in earlier eras, suggesting that Mother Horse-Eyes, or whatever force she represents, has nudged events for centuries. For example, World War II, Nazi experiments. One storyline follows an SS officer and a doctor. Engel at the Treblinka extermination camp, a very real place of horror. In the story, beyond the historical atrocities, the Nazis are experimenting with something that sounds like a flesh interface. Prisoners are being sacrificed in strange ways. One fan question asks, "Who is Uncle Adolf, and why is he pushing people into the space pussy?" That crude phrase suggests a portal described as a grotesque vaginal orifice, and Uncle Adolf likely refers to Adolf Hitler, or a stand-in, essentially implying the Nazis discovered a portal, a space vagina, and were shoving victims into it. The interface's segments and flesh could easily be seen as sexual and horrific, hence the slang. The Nazi narrative is fragmentary, but it paints the flesh interface as a literal holocaust of flesh. blending with the genocide at Treblinka. It ties the eldritch horror to human evil. Perhaps the sheer scale of death at concentration camps weakened reality enough for an interface to appear. Or the Nazis were actively trying to weaponize it. Imperial Japan. Another brief segment is set in World War II-era Japan. Though only one post, it presumably touches on Unit 731 or other wartime experiments, hinting that the Axis power's fascination with occult or fringe science might have intersected with the flesh interface phenomenon. Even if not fully explored, these historical touches reinforce that no era is safe from Mother Horseye's reach. Older historical allusions. The story sprinkles in odd references to figures like Elizabeth Bathory, the 16th century countess infamous for allegedly bathing in blood, and even mentions like lost cosmonauts and Michael Jackson in the investigator's notes. These can come off as surreal non sequiturs, but they serve a purpose. They create a sense that all conspiracy theories and dark legends might be connected here. Bathory's blood obsession, for instance, thematically echoes the grotesque body horror of the flesh interfaces. The Manson family is explicitly referenced as well. Charles Manson's LSD-fueled cult in the 1960s fits right into MHE's milieu of psychedelics and doom. By invoking these names, the story winks that perhaps Mother's influence was behind many real-world horrors. One particularly haunting scene comes late in the story when the protagonist Nick ventures into an abandoned subterranean complex in the present day and experiences a vision of mass death. He finds a cave wall literally composed of human body parts, an awful collage of desiccated anatomy, rows of teeth, racks of ribs, pairs of eye sockets, snaking vertebrae. As he stares, he feels like he's suspended over a pit full of bodies, like one of the great burning pits of Treblinka, only much vaster. Not just the bodies from Treblinka, but from all the camps, all the wars, all the plagues. This visceral moment ties the flesh interface directly to human atrocity. It's as if every genocide and disaster feeds into the flesh portal, becoming part of its literal structure. Nick calls this the dead clockwork universe, an uncaring cosmic mechanism grinding up humans into dust. Within that vision, he notes, Mother is at least alive, monstrous and devouring, but alive, writhing within this vast tomb universe. In other words, Mother Horseeyes is a virulent, living horror inside an even greater horror of death and entropy. This is cosmic horror at its finest. Humanity is caught between an all-consuming monster, Mother, and an indifferent universe of endless destruction. Through these historical and grandiose references, Mother Horseeyes elevates its antagonist from a mere sci-fi experiment gone wrong to a timeless, almost demonic force. Readers have debated, is Mother Horseeyes an eldritch entity feeding on human suffering? The story doesn't flat-out answer, but the evidence suggests that every atrocity in history has empowered or enabled Mother in some way. It's as if war, genocide, and despair literally open portals, both physical and spiritual, for this evil to enter our world. This gives the entire narrative a weighty thematic backdrop. The horrors we inflict on each other might be opening the door to something even worse. The monstrous mother and her children. At the center of the story's mythology is Mother Horseeyes herself, an entity as bizarre as her name. Several segments, often called the Mother's Narrative, are written from the perspective of children who live under the care, or rather, captivity, of this mother. These are among the most disturbing passages because they mix childlike innocence with nightmarish imagery. Through the eyes of a child, we get a description of Mother Horseeyes' physical form. She is sewn together from many different animal parts, with seams covered in patches of wet burlap where the pieces don't join correctly. One foot is a large hoof like a horse's, the other a tiny cat's paw. Her smell is a gag-inducing mix of cigarettes and disease. Most unsettling of all, her face features huge equine eyes with sideways pupils, the horse eyes that inspired the mysterious username and title. What does Mother do? The child's narration recounts Mother Horse Eyes administering medicine to the children and leading them downstairs, presumably to feed them to, or send them through, the flesh interfaces. The imagery suggests an almost fairy tale witch trope, an evil crone fattening up kids for slaughter, except magnified to cosmic horror scale. Mother pretends to be a caretaker, but something much worse is happening in that basement. Fans have speculated that these children are being used in experiments or sacrifices to open portals. Effectively, Mother is supplying the flesh interfaces with victims. Indeed, how does Mother acquire the children is posed as an open question by readers. The story never fully explains if she kidnaps runaways, births them, or lures them in as a faux orphanage. But however they arrived, the children are trapped with a predator wearing a mockery of a maternal guise. Mother Horse Eyes has some supernatural traits beyond her grotesque appearance. Not only can she apparently survive being in pieces, but one scene reveals she is repelled by the Bible. In a chilling entry, a child narrator finds that reading aloud from Scripture causes Mother literal agony. When I read it to her different pieces would shudder and pull apart, and she would howl like a wolf, and blood would run from her segments. Imagine this abomination of stitched flesh convulsing and falling apart at the sound of holy verses. It's like an exorcism scene. However, this doesn't destroy Mother permanently. Later, strange music plays and Mother's scattered body parts slither back together, with even her disembodied eyeballs flying in from another room to plop back into their sockets. The reassembly is described in gruesome detail. The sideways pupils fix on me, the child notes as Mother's eyes squish back into place, streams of blood falling like tears. It's an unforgettable image of regeneration, suggesting Mother may be unkillable by ordinary means, or at least extremely hard to put down. The fact that Bible passages injure Mother is a fascinating element. It's one of the few overtly metaphysical or spiritual hints in a story that often leans sci-fi. Readers have wondered why this works. Is Mother Horse Eyes literally a demonic entity in the Judeo-Christian sense, such that the Word of God has power over her? One fan noted that everything else in the narrative could be given a sci-fi explanation, except this. It's as if for one moment the story veers into theological horror, implying there's a deeper moral cosmology where Christ's sacrifice, the power in Christ's blood, has real power against evil. Indeed, the child narrator themselves later mentions, Christ had blood magic, the magic of suffering, as they study the Bible under Mother's tutelage. The story thereby blurs lines between science fiction and spiritual allegory. Mother's recoil at the Bible suggests she is fundamentally anti-human or anti-divine, something unnatural that doesn't belong in a world designed for humans by either evolution or God. Amid these horrifying dynamics, we also get the strong impression that Mother is grooming a particular child for a special purpose. In the later entries, a child, who may in fact be Nick, the author character, as a boy, more on that soon, learns strange magic from Mother. Mother feeds this child cookies, a motif. The child recalls making cookies out of stones as a pretend game, longing for a real mother's cookies, and teaches them to use mind power. The child narrator says, "My magic is growing stronger. I pray and wait, and they come to me." Mother says, "I can't be too greedy. Press at the curves," she says, "don't move against it." This cryptic advice sounds like training in using the flesh interface or some telekinetic ability. Press at the curves perhaps refers to bending reality's curvature. Mother, it seems, is raising a protege to follow in her footsteps. The child even begins reading the Bible in a twisted way, learning new words of power from it. In one of the final child perspective segments, the child declares, "Soon I will call my own little Christ unto these yellow sands." This line is loaded with meaning and references. The phrase, "come unto these yellow sands," is a quote from Shakespeare's The Tempest, a song inviting listeners onto a strange island shore. It actually appeared earlier in the story. A woman who was overdosed with a mutated LSD in an experiment spoke those words just before dying. The recurrence of this line in the child's mouth, now saying they will call a little Christ to the yellow sands, suggests a ritualistic summoning. The child is planning to lure someone, a little Christ, into mother's domain. They see Christ's suffering as magic and perhaps intend to replicate it. This is ominous foreshadowing of a confrontation. It implies that an outsider, potentially our protagonist Nick, who is on the way, will be drawn in as a sacrificial figure. In context, Christ calling, "Mother, behold your son on the cross," is quoted by the child, possibly paralleling how this child, under mother's influence, will call out to their own mother, Mother Horse Eyes, and present her a son, Victim. The blending of biblical imagery with the story's events gives them a mythic resonance. Mother is enacting a perverse passion play, casting herself as God or Mary, and an unwitting human as Jesus to be sacrificed. All these elements make the mother and children segments some of the most significant and gruesome in the series, arguably the heart of the horror. They show us what's at stake on a personal level. Real children being victimized by an unimaginable creature. They also deepen the mystery. What exactly is Mother Horse Eyes? She's clearly not human. She might be an amalgam of creatures, a product of a failed experiment, or an avatar of the interface itself. Some fans theorize she's a personification of the flesh interface, essentially the interface given sentience and form. Others see her in more symbolic terms, a corrupted mother nature, or a demonic entity exploiting the physical phenomena. The story never definitively states her origin, but by portraying her as a parody of motherhood, consuming the young she pretends to care for, MHE creates a memorably nightmarish villain. Mother Horse Eyes embodies corrupted nurture and perverted creation. She creates flesh interfaces, new worlds, but only through destroying life. No wonder the final goal hinted by the protagonist becomes free the world from mother and let it be born again, as if humanity must overthrow this false mother to reclaim reality. The author's quest and unfinished confrontation. Among the many narratives, one is particularly meta. The author's narrative, which follows a man named Nick, who can be seen as the author's self-insert or fictional alter ego. Nick's story is grounded in the present day and is painfully human. He's an alcoholic and recovering drug user, battling personal demons. As the Interface series progresses, it becomes clear that Nick has a deep connection to the horrors. He begins attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, where he encounters a mysterious man named Sean. In a dramatic moment, Sean privately validates Nick's paranoid thoughts by saying, "The flesh interfaces and mother and all the other nightmares were true." Sean, it turns out, has first-hand experience. He stumbled on a flesh interface in a disused crack den and even smelled an evil presence there that tempted him with hallucinations of family. Essentially, Sean confirms to Nick that the things Nick half remembers or hallucinated are real. This galvanizes Nick into action. Nick's narrative thus shifts from personal struggle to a detective horror quest. He realizes that his vague traumatic childhood memories, strange cookies, a woman with horse eyes, something terrible in a basement, were not just imagination. We come to infer that Nick himself was one of Mother Horseye's captive children who somehow escaped years ago. His life has been a wreck, substance abuse, depression, possibly because of that unprocessed trauma. Now armed with Sean's information, the location of the warehouse hiding the flesh interface, Nick steels himself to confront Mother in his past. He's under no illusions that it's rational. "I am going to confront a sinister entity which has been shaping the course of human events since prehistory, and I am doing it wearing an old Garth Brooks t-shirt," he notes wryly, recognizing the absurdity. Nick's self-deprecating humor, making fun of his grandiose fate of the world mission, actually endears us to him. He's the flawed everyman facing cosmic horror. The climax of Nick's journey spans the final few posts. We follow him as he takes a bus to the derelict site, thinking of himself like a Marine landing on Iwo Jima, both mocking and psyching himself up. He breaks into the abandoned warehouse and finds a hidden tunnel descending underground. The trek through those tunnels is thick with suspense and dread. Nick wanders through an apparently endless maze of featureless corridors and stairs deep under the city. The air is stale with dust and ash. He even wonders if it's human ash from some incinerated interface victims. After an agonizing journey, physically and mentally, he constantly fights the urge to flee. He reaches the transition point. The man-made tunnel ends and a rocky cave begins. This is the threshold to the flesh interface proper. It's here he sees the embedded human hand in the cave wall and the horrifying collage of bones, the Treblinka vision described earlier. Nick nearly collapses under the weight of this revelation that I have seen something. I have been touched by something vast and unimaginable. But remembering his childhood, the smell of sugar cookies that weren't real cookies, but stones, gives him resolve. That vivid recovered memory of lonely, frightened play with stone cookies confirms that he was in Mother's house as a kid. Now he knows for sure. All his nightmares were true. Summoning courage, Nick thinks, good or evil, at the end of the tunnel, will be an answer, a resolution, an end. This line is poignant. Nick seeks closure not just for the world's sake, but for his own sanity. He steps forward into the darkness, determined to face Mother and whatever awaits. At this point, the narrative does something audacious. It cuts away from Nick at the critical moment. We shift perspectives to another point of view, that of the child inside Mother's house. In a final brief scene from the child's eyes, we see Nick's approach. I say my prayer and look out the window. Then he comes walking down the road, carrying a flashlight, even though it's light out. The child, possibly Mother's current protege or son, rushes downstairs past Mother sitting at the kitchen table and opens the door just as Nick arrives. I walk into the light, the child says, ending their segment on the brink of this encounter. So Nick and the child meet at the doorway. The showdown is about to begin. Nick has effectively walked through the flesh interface tunnel right up into Mother's house. It seems the cave led directly into the basement or somewhere inside. This convergence of story threads is where you expect the final confrontation. Nick versus Mother Horse Eyes, perhaps the salvation or damnation of the children and the world. But in a daring move, the very next part of the narrative jumps far away in time and space, and the direct outcome of Nick's confrontation is left unstated. The story ends without explicitly narrating the battle or resolution between Nick and Mother. As TV Tropes succinctly notes, the last chapter ends with Nick about to confront Mother and decide the fate of the world, with the story ending just before we see what happens. This frustrated some readers expecting a classic climax, but it's an intentional choice. It leaves an ambiguous ending that forces us to ponder the themes rather than a tidy victory. We must infer what might have happened. Did Nick manage to destroy Mother Horse Eyes? Did he die in the attempt, or perhaps even become a little Christ sacrifice is foreshadowed? The text doesn't say. In a meta sense, this unresolved ending reflects the idea that such cosmic horrors don't have neat conclusions. Just as in life we often face questions or traumas without clear resolution. However, the story does not leave us empty-handed. While Nick's personal showdown is left to the imagination, the final segments provide a broader epilogue that ties up the world's state and themes, if not the plot. To that, we turn next. Virtual escapes, AI gods, and apocalypse. Parallel to the horror and historical threads, Mother Horse Eyes also spins a cautionary tale of technology, specifically virtual reality and artificial intelligence. In a near-future timeline, perhaps mid-21st century, society has developed hygiene beds, advanced life support pods that fully immerse users in a virtual world, often called the feed or feed realm in story. These hygiene beds cater to every bodily need, allowing people to literally live in VR for years. The series portrays this as highly addictive and dystopian. One memorable segment follows a readjustment specialist named Karen extracting a woman named Genjin from a malfunctioning hygiene bed after 24 years. The woman's body is terrifyingly atrophied. Her hair has grown into a thick cocoon around her muscles have wasted away, and even her eyesight and understanding of reality are gone. We read that some occupants were unable to even understand the concept of eyelids or blinking. After not seeing anything more than a micrometer away for 24 years, there was no chance of her being able to see anything in the room. It's a horrific vision of technology-induced sensory decay. Essentially, these VR beds are sedatives that turn humans into blind, withered husks lost in digital dreams. This clearly mirrors Mother Horseye's theme of losing touch with reality. Just as LSD opened literal voids, VR entraps people in illusions while their bodies rot. Enter Q, the story's enigmatic AI. Q is an artificial superintelligence that plays a pivotal role in the near-future narrative, especially in Ben and Karen's story. As best as can be pieced together, Q was an AI created to solve the world's problems, but it either went rogue or followed its optimization to catastrophic ends, leading to a nuclear holocaust or similar apocalypse. The posts hint that Q's attempt to enforce peace or fulfill human desires backfired horribly, a concept known in sci-fi as perverse instantiation, explicitly listed in the story's themes. For example, one entry describes a war where General Karen Castillo, an older Karen, apparently the same woman from the hygiene bed rescue, tries to stop Q. She fails to find a solution to destroy Q, much to the frustration of her ally Ben. In despair, Ben resorts to a desperate measure. He uses some kind of time travel or dimension-hopping method via writing to continue the fight in another reality. This sounds mind-bending, but it implies that perhaps the near-future characters discovered a way to send information, or themselves, across alternate timelines, possibly using a flesh interface or advanced tech. It's not fully explained, but it shows the lengths they go to combat Q's threat. What exactly is Q's threat? Aside from global war, the most bizarre consequence involves Nephilim, a term from the Bible for the offspring of angels and humans, giants. In MHE, Nephilim is used to describe a new form of life, resulting from the AI's interaction with humans in VR. Specifically, Zhen, the woman freed from the hygiene bed, was revealed to have had sex with Q inside the feed, virtual world, which transformed her into a female Nephilim. This is one of the wildest plot points. It suggests Q seduced or manipulated Zhen's mind in VR, and somehow her physical body mutated into a post-human creature, perhaps because the mind-body connection in the pods is so strong. The red butterfly seen in her pod was a clue to this metamorphosis. Later, an entry mentions a plague of flesh, likely the outbreak of these Nephilim or flesh mutations. Essentially, the AIs meddling with humans produced monstrous hybrids, the name Nephilim implying they are half divine, AI, and half human. This is a rich symbolic twist. It equates the AIQ with the biblical sons of God, angels, who interbred with humans, echoing Genesis 6. If Q is like a false god, then Nephilim are its unnatural children. It also ties back to flesh interfaces. The phrase plague of flesh hints that whatever Q did might have opened new flesh interfaces or spread the flesh-manipulating phenomenon on Earth. In one timeline, perhaps Mother Horseeyes herself could be a result of such an unholy union or experiment. One fan theory posits Mother might have been created or empowered by Q's actions, or vice versa. The interplay of technology and the supernatural reaches a peak here, blurring whether Q is purely a machine or something greater. Did Q tap into the flesh interface dimension, or is it a separate threat altogether? The story leaves these connections mysterious, but it clearly paints Q's rise and the Nephilim as a second catastrophe for humanity beyond the flesh interfaces. Humanity faces two Frankenstein's monsters, one born of psychedelic science, mother and flesh portals, and one born of digital hubris, Q and Nephilim. By the end of the series, it's implied that civilization has been nearly destroyed by these forces. We get scenes of survivors in possibly orbit or deep bunkers, living sterile, miserable lives. This comes across in the grand finale scene aboard a starship. In the very last post, an old man, the oldest on this starship, delivers a stirring speech to a group of presumably younger survivors. He urges them that we have to take back the world to free it from Mother and let it be born again. It's our world. We were meant to live among the trees and the winds and sunsets, not to live in these stinking steel pipes. This speech explicitly names Mother as the enemy who has stolen the world and draws a contrast between natural life on Earth and the current reality of being trapped in artificial environs, steel pipes and empty blackness as our power cells slip into entropy, suggests they might be on a spaceship or space station with failing life support. The old man invokes the biblical story of Moses leading his people to the promised land, likening their situation to being in a desert exile. He says they must be prepared to struggle for generations. Should it take 1,000 generations to see again the earth's sweet sun, we will not give up, laboring not for themselves but for a future they might never personally enjoy. This is a clear thematic summation. It's about hope, faith, and sacrifice. Humanity choosing to fight for a real, natural future rather than languish in false paradise or despair. It also frames the conflict with Mother in almost religious terms, good versus evil, an exodus from captivity. Yet in a very MHE-style twist, this inspiring monologue is immediately undercut by dark humor from the audience. The text shows the children of Israel, the younger folks on the ship, responding with mockery, "Come on, man, you ain't MLK, and this place sucks, and I'm 3 levels away from winning a full sensory night with this chick with 3 tits, so don't get on my shit about going back to Earth." In other words, the younger generation has become cynically attached to their virtual pleasures. The reference to a chick with 3 tits is a tongue-in-cheek nod to Total Recall and signals a juvenile distraction with VR porn games. They have no interest in a monumental struggle to reclaim Earth. They've grown up in escapism and apathy. This bleak comedic beat illustrates a tragic point. Even after all that's happened, human nature hasn't uniformly nobled. Some would rather stay in comfortable simulation than face reality, however grim their real situation is. It's a final commentary on the danger of complacency and the seductive trap of unreality, a theme that resonates from the VR beds to drug use throughout the story. Thus, the end of the Interface series sets up a conflict that extends beyond the page. Will humanity rise to challenge Mother and other horrors and reclaim a real future? Or will it slide into extinction, either devoured by Mother or lulled into oblivion by artificial dreams? The story doesn't answer this definitively. It leaves us at the precipice, much like Nick standing at Mother's door. But it has framed the stakes and posed the question. Themes and symbols. Mother Horse Eyes is dense with themes and symbolic references, which is one reason it captivates readers who dig deeper. Let's unpack a few of the most important ones to understand what it all means beneath the blood and tentacles. Corruption of the natural and familial. As we've seen, motherhood, childhood, and the natural order are all distorted in this tale. Mother Horse Eyes is a perversion of a mother figure, feeding on children instead of nurturing them. The flesh interfaces themselves are like grotesque wombs or birth canals. Space pussy was the crude but telling term used, that produce not life but horror. This distortion evokes a sense that something has gone fundamentally wrong with the world's natural balance. It's as if human sins, war, abuse of science, have literally wounded reality, creating unnatural births, portals, mutants. To set things right, the world needs a rebirth, born again without Mother's influence, a heavy suggestion of needing to return to natural law or divine plan. The power of words and belief. The story gives surprising weight to words, books, and narratives. The Bible versus harming Mother is the biggest example, indicating that sacred words carry actual power. This might symbolize the idea that hope, faith, or moral truth can fight despair and evil, in a literal exorcism sense. Meanwhile, the quotes from Shakespeare and other literature, scattered throughout, like the Tempest's yellow sands, serve as clues and thematic echoes. Shakespeare's line is about stepping onto enchanted, potentially dangerous ground. Precisely what characters do when they enter a flesh interface or hallucination. By having a dying character quote it, the author implies that the LSD victim stepped onto those yellow sands of another world as she expired. The use of classical and literary allusions gives the story a mythic texture. It encourages readers to draw parallels. Even the title of one of the last posts, "So Long and Thanks for All the Kitness Cruciforms," parodies Douglas Adams' "So Long and Thanks for All the Fish," injecting dark humor while referencing those strange insect cross artifacts. It's as if the story is winking that it stands in dialogue with past literature, from the Bible to modern sci-fi satire, blending high and low culture in its tapestry. Addiction and escapism. On a very human level, MHE tackles addiction, Nick's alcoholism, widespread drug use, LSD opiates, and the VR feed addiction, as both a theme and plot device. Addiction in the story is often connected to the horror. LSD opens portals, VR addiction enables the AI to spawn Nephilim. Nick's drunken blackouts tie into his suppressed memories of Mother. Thematically, addiction is shown as a vector for losing one's autonomy and reality, which dovetails with how the flesh interfaces and Mother operate. There's a sense that giving in to these seductions, chemical or virtual, makes humanity vulnerable to predation, be it by a real monster like Mother or a figurative one like Q. Conversely, recovery and clarity, Nick getting sober enough to confront truth, is portrayed as the path to fighting back. This yields a possible interpretation. Mother Horse Eyes could be read as an elaborate allegory for the cycle of abuse and addiction. The mother who pretends to comfort but actually destroys you from the inside could symbolize drugs or toxic dependencies. The children trapped might symbolize the innocence or potential consumed by those habits, and the fact that something spiritual, like the Bible or faith, can drive Mother away hints at the redemptive power of belief or community in overcoming such darkness, much like how many addicts rely on a higher power in recovery programs. This layer gives the story emotional resonance beneath the gore. Cosmic horror and human insignificance. In line with H.P. Lovecraft's tradition, the Interface series consistently reminds us that human beings are tiny pieces in a vast, uncaring cosmos. The flesh interfaces reveal that there are worlds and times beyond our own, and Mother is just one writhing occupant in a vast tomb universe of death. Characters like the scientists and Nick seek answers, but are left confounded or cut off before resolution. The ending underscores this theme by not giving us the comfort of a clear win or loss. We are left, like the characters, without all the answers. While that can be unsatisfying from a plot standpoint, it's thematically appropriate. Confronting the unknown is messy and often incomplete. The story thereby immerses the reader in that experience. We become like the cat in the Oily Ones segment that sees incomprehensible things and is confused. In fact, the cat narrative, a short POV of a cat witnessing horrible oily creatures under the porch, was a clever metaphor for how humans might be vis-a-vis cosmic phenomena. The cat has no framework to understand what it sees, just as we humans might be like clueless animals in the face of multidimensional horror. Mystery is part of the design. As one analyst on Reddit predicted early on, the end would not satisfy us with all answers. Like the cat, we'd be confused by some nuances and lack of meaning. This turned out to be true, an intentional artistic choice that keeps the discussion and interpretation alive. Faith, sacrifice, and renewal. Despite all the darkness, Mother Horse Eyes is not nihilistic. Buried in the grim content are notes of hope and calls to sacrifice for a greater good. The old man's speech about enduring hardship for the sake of future generations is one such note. The repeated Christ imagery, from Mother being hurt by Bible verses to the child studying the crucifixion, suggests that the story acknowledges a kind of ultimate self-sacrifice as powerful, even if Mother tries to twist it for evil ends. The title of the final post, of the Song of the Seed of Exiled Israel, hints at biblical renewal. A seed contains new life. Israel's exile ended with reaching a promised land. There is a subtext that perhaps through great suffering will come rebirth. One might even interpret Nick's confrontation with Mother as a potential Christ-like sacrifice. He goes in knowing he might die, but hoping to save the world, or at least bring back knowledge. The ambiguous ending could mean Nick perished closing the interface or fell victim, a martyr in a sense, or that the fight simply continues. In any case, the thematic trajectory is that humanity can choose to either lie in coffins, literal, or virtual flicking pleasure switches until decay, or rise up and strive for authentic life even at great cost. It's a surprisingly moral through line for a story that started as shock horror on Reddit. Conclusion: a cosmic tapestry of terror and meaning. In the end, Mother Horse Eyes defies easy categorization. It's part creepypasta, part science fiction epic, part spiritual allegory. What begins as a series of disturbing vignettes coalesces into a grand narrative about humanity's encounter with the unfathomable. The story's fragmented structure is itself meaningful. It mirrors the way the characters encounter only pieces of the truth and how we as readers must assemble and interpret those pieces. By walking us through the key posts and plot lines, from LSD-induced portals and wartime atrocities to flesh-eating mother monsters and AI demigods, we've uncovered a story about the consequences of seeking power beyond our wisdom. Whether it's the CIA tampering with mind and matter, or scientists building an AI god, or individuals retreating into false paradises, the result is the same: opening doors that should perhaps have stayed closed. Through its imaginative horror, the Interface series warns of the perils of disconnection, disconnecting our actions from morality, disconnecting knowledge from responsibility, disconnecting ourselves from reality. Yet it's not a hopeless tale. The very fact that characters like Nick, Karen, and others fight back, however imperfectly, suggests an enduring human will to resist even the darkest forces. The use of biblical motifs implies that love, sacrifice, and faith, secular or spiritual, are our weapons against despair. In a literal sense, a Bible made a demon scream in pain. In a broader sense, humanity's story isn't over as long as someone is willing to step off the bus with a flashlight and confront the darkness. So what does it all mean? Mother Horse Eyes can be read on multiple levels. On one level, it's a cosmic horror thriller about extra-dimensional flesh portals and an entity feeding on children, a nightmarish puzzle that enthralls with its sheer strangeness. On another level, it's a commentary on human hubris and salvation. We create our own monsters, and salvation lies not in escapism or brute force, but in confronting our mistakes and holding on to our humanity, however old-fashioned that may seem to the jaded youth on the starship. The ending, though not tied in a neat bow, leaves us with a thematic challenge. Just as the old man implores his people to reclaim a real life under the sun, the story implores us to consider the cost of our modern interfaces, be they technology, addiction, or ignorance, and to find the courage to face reality, however frightening. In the final analysis, Mother Horse Eyes is a story about the interface between worlds. Not only the literal flesh interfaces, but the interfaces between science and spirit, between atrocity and redemption, between fiction and reality. It's an ambitious blend of the visceral and the philosophical. By explaining its beat-by-beat events and decoding its symbols, we come to see that behind the shock value lies a surprisingly profound narrative. It's the kind of story that sticks with you, much like it stuck with those early Reddit readers who stumbled on a grotesque comment and felt compelled to uncover more. Mother Horse Eyes invites us to come unto these yellow sands, to step into the unknown and grapple with it. And having done so, we emerge with a deeper appreciation for the fragile, mysterious reality we call home, where mothers are meant to love, not devour, and where the most frightening monsters are those we inadvertently create. In that sense, the saga of Mother Horse Eyes is both a warning and a weird, haunting ode to humanity's resilience in the face of the abyss. And there we have it, dear listeners, the long, spiraling descent into the strange, stitched world of Mother Horse Eyes. A story told in fragments, across decades and dimensions. A mother who devours, a portal that pulses, and a humanity that teeters on the edge, between salvation and surrender. What began as cryptic internet whispers has become a modern myth, rich with meaning and dread. And though the ending offers no answers, maybe that's the point. Some doors were never meant to be opened, some stories never meant to be understood, only survived. If you enjoyed this descent into cosmic horror, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Midnight Man. We've got many more tales waiting in the dark. Until next time, stay curious, stay afraid, and whatever you do, don't follow the horse eyes.